Hello everyone, welcome back to the Gospel of John in 5 minutes. Today is day 40. Here we go, the last day of the Gospel of John in 5 minutes. As we read yesterday at the end of chapter 21, John ended the chapter by saying, "There are also many other things which Jesus did. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written." That was how the Gospel of John ended, but as he said, there are many other things that could have been written. So I want to spend some time today talking about what else I think happened after the resurrection. No, just kidding. We're not going to do that today. There is no chapter 22 of the Gospel of John. There's probably some Gnostic gospel out there that adds events to the resurrection of Jesus. We can talk about that at a different time. We're done with the Gospel of John. We finished up yesterday. So now we were talking, and Rick and I thought, let's just do a wrap-up of all the things that we've seen in the Gospel of John. So let's just kind of recap some of the themes that we saw in the Gospel of John. First of all, we saw the theme that Christ is the Lamb of God. We saw that all throughout the story of the Gospel of John. John the Baptist called him the Lamb. Jesus said that he was going to give his flesh to eat just as the Lamb had done. On the cross, none of his bones were broken, right? We saw that he was truly the Lamb of God. We also saw in the Gospel of John the importance of the sacraments, right? How the blood and water poured forth from his side, representing baptism and the Eucharist. We read about the bread of life discourse in chapter 6, where Jesus talked about giving us his flesh to eat. At the Last Supper, Jesus commanded his disciples to abide in him. He had already told them how to do that in chapter 6, the bread of life discourse. How do you abide in him? By consuming his flesh, right? So those are some of the themes. We saw the theme of Christ ushering in a new creation, right? We talked about how in the first 2 chapters there was the series of days. There was the next day, the next day, the next day. Finally, the third day, which we know was the 7th day, leading up in the chronology of the Gospel of John, and that 7th day, Jesus was at a wedding, and there was a woman there, right? We talked about how that was John describing Jesus as a new Adam and Mary as a new Eve, which is why Jesus called her woman. Not only there, but he also called her woman again on the cross. We said how Christ on the cross, the blood and water came forth from his side, giving birth to the church, just as Adam, when he slept in the sleep of death, gave birth to his bride. His bride, Adam. We saw in the Gospel of John this idea of the signs, that Jesus was performing not just miracles, but signs that were pointing to something greater. Jesus didn't want people to follow him just because they were amazed at his miracles. Each of those signs he performed pointed to something even greater, and he wanted his people to see that. That's why John calls them signs, not just miracles. Talked about how the first part of the Gospel of John was mainly called the Book of Signs. All of those signs leading up to the greatest sign, the raising of Lazarus, and then ultimately the 7th and final sign, Jesus' own resurrection. We talked about how the second half of the Gospel of John is called the Book of Glory, because it was in this section that Jesus talks about his name being glorified and about how God the Father was going to glorify him. But unlike the other Gospels, where so much of the glory we see on the Transfiguration on the mountain, rather than the Gospel of John, what's the moment of glory? It's the actual moment of crucifixion on Mount Calvary. And we see this in the Gospel of John. We talked about how there were different I am sayings in the Gospel of John. Jesus calls himself, I am the good shepherd. I am the gate. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Why did he keep saying I am in all those different places? We talked about how that actually came from the Old Testament. How God, when he revealed himself to Moses in the burning bush, Moses said, "What shall I tell them your name is?" And God said, "I am who I am." In Hebrew, Yahweh, or in Greek, ego eimi, I am. Every one of those I am sayings that Jesus said, I am the good shepherd, I am the gate, I am the way, the truth, and the life. In Greek, he was saying ego eimi. In Hebrew, Yahweh, pointing to himself as the God from the beginning. The same God who spoke to Moses in the burning bush. Right? So all these themes in the Gospel of John. So I hope this has been exciting for you. I hope you feel like you're an expert now in the Gospel of John. I hope you feel like this is a book you can go back to year after year. Keep reading, keep praying through the Gospel of John, keep studying it. We're just scratching the surface. There's so much more we could have talked about. There's so much more that can be revealed to you if you take the time to keep praying, reading, and studying the Gospel of John. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Rick, do you have anything to say? Okay, good. Very good. Thank you, everybody.